Hey,
How's
how
it
you
going?
doing, mate? You all right?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent.
How's life on the West Coast?
Life is good. Life is I cannot complain. You know what I mean?
Your music seems to have a very positive kind of vibe to it. Like, has it always been that way, or are you just feeling more positive these days?
I I just feel like I feel like I have no choice. I have to believe that there is some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? That's just I guess our mindset as we were writing songs in this time was like this is really depressing. And I think everybody's gonna be writing depressing songs.
Yeah,
And why don't we just not do that? Let's take it in the opposite direction and be like, okay, there's still time to feel good again.
yeah. So, and I think on this new single, which is Island Honey, that's definitely about looking forward to the future when we can kind of enjoy life, right?
Yeah, there's definitely the aspect of I hesitate to use the word escapism because it implies you're like running away from your problems, but it kind of is. It's just the imagery that kind of came into my head as that in the process of writing the song, and I followed that.
Yeah. So tell me when Black Pontiac kind of came together as an idea.
Black Pontiac. So it began with myself and Mac, the lead guitarist, maybe 4 years ago. He played guitar and I sang, and we were in the same kind of circle of friends, and we said, okay, well, let's get together and let's, I don't know, hang out, maybe write songs or something. And it just kind of, we immediately had that chemistry where it just worked, right? And we had personalities and tastes and interests that kind of were not entirely the same but coalesced very well. And adding his brother Sam on the drums, and then Avery in the bass, and the idea there wasn't to even up until this point, like with this new album coming out, we haven't gone into the songwriting process or even producing the songs or recording them with any specific kind of intention.
Right.
It's just been, we were going to go in there and do something weird, do something cool, maybe do something a little different. Right. And I think that whole idea of who and what we are is still in the process of coming together.
Okay.
Right. We're still trying to figure out what exactly Black Pontiac is and who we are as people. And I think that's just, as we grow as artists and as we grow as people, I think that will become more clear as time goes on.
Yeah, for sure. And when you first got into a room with your instruments, was there any kind of conversation about maybe what you didn't want to be doing?
I know everyone didn't want me to play guitar. And fair enough. I'm just not a great guitarist. I'm not a great instrumentalist.
Some of the most famous musicians in history have not been particularly gifted as musicians. They've just had the passion and the authenticity to go with it. So you could always just go down that road.
Well, that's exactly. I mean, that's kind of what ended up happening. Is I felt like I needed to have something in my hands when I was doing the thing, but I just find it's so much better to just kind of I just sing, right? And it's just myself and the microphone, and I can move around, I can have a little bit more stage presence, and I have a lot of fun doing that.
Right.
So I'm glad everyone talked me out of that.
So what kind of music were you listening to when the band came together? Were you all fans of similar styles of music?
I guess Mac had turned me on to Pearl Jam. And so that actually, funny enough, yeah. Like that album 10, just incredible. Like every single song, really. And so that was just a lot of classic rock type things. You know, he had shown me all these, you know, Pro Jam, and Jimi Hendrix was another one. That wasn't something I like. I didn't understand Jimi Hendrix as an artist, but up until that point, like I knew some of the songs. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, but like, and this is kind of what's happened for me with a lot of artists as time has gone on. Just like the fact that I don't really care for their music is more me not understanding what their intention is and what they're trying to do and express.
And do you find that the more you dig into that catalog, the more you kind of discover that, or do you not really take the time to try and discover that and you move on to the next artist?
No, that's absolutely what happens, right? Like now, like right now, I'm really trying to do that with jazz music.
Right.
I'm like, oh man, like I don't really know what's happening here. This is really insane, but I want to understand it. So I just like, I'm trying to put in the work, I guess, so to speak. And I'm challenging myself as a listener.
And with something like jazz music, there's so much of it. It's like, where do you even start with that?
Yeah.
So how do you work that out? Do you get advice from other people that maybe know more about that stuff?
Well, I'd kind of just ask people, okay, so what are some, you know, I guess classics or whatever. Yeah. What's a classic? You know, what's something that everybody agrees like this is like an album you must listen to, right?
Okay.
So, you know, like something like Miles Davis's Blue and Green. And I still don't totally get it, but I like it. I kind of like it. I'm like, this is cool. Right?
Yeah, I think especially with somebody like Miles Davis, he can go like on like these weird tangents where I think you need repeated listens to even understand it.
Yes,
because it's so complex. But you know, he's obviously a legend and super talented, but it's not always easy listening, especially on the first listen.
Yeah, exactly. And like the same for like even like some of Carlos Santana's solo material or some of the stuff he did later on in his career before he made that big comeback with Supernatural was very inspired by that kind of spiritual jazz. And I was like, wow, this is so like mind bending.
Yeah. Well, if you consider yourself not the greatest guitar player in the world and you're listening to Jimi Hendrix and Santana, then I don't know if that's just going to put you off playing guitar altogether or inspire you to get better.
Yeah, no, it's definitely inspiring. It's definitely just to hear how, well, you start to recognize the different voices that these artists have. Like the way Santana, like I read his biography, is incredible. He studied singers, and that was how he modeled his guitar playing, like guys like Marvin Gaye,
right,
and Aretha.
So you're kind of the flip version of that. You're studying guitarist, but you know, you're a singer and yes, you're trying to find that middle ground, I guess. So who inspires you as a singer? Who are your favorite vocalists?
Oh man, wow. I mean, I guess it's gotta be Anthony Kiedis. It's gotta be. You know, there's this big running joke about how we used to sound like a lot like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I try not to bring it up, but like I had that was the other thing I was listening to when we had started the band was a lot of the Chili Peppers, a lot of it, and that a lot of hip hop and like R&B.
Okay.
Like I always think of it like the vocals that kind of bounce like when you skip a stone on a lake bed. That's kind of how I like to think of writing when I write songs, you know, something very kind of that bounces a little bit with the, like I follow along with the percussion almost more so than the instrument, like the rest of the instruments when we're doing something like playing live.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell me about the song Tequila Cream, like the vocal in that, like that's a stone skipping for a long time and at high speed. Like
yeah.
Are you confident you can do that every time when you play live?
It's so far, yes. There's just different, like, it's like, okay, I gotta breathe here,
yeah,
here, right? And I think it's like slightly different live now. I think as time has gone on, I'm like, we wrote that song, or when we wrote it, I was very much in this state of mind, like, okay, I'm just gonna like write whatever pops into my head, and just like it's like a stream of consciousness that you're hearing there. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, well, let's change this so this syllable fits better here, right? Because certain I guess letters and things kind of just flow better, things like that,
right? But
more or less we try and do the whole thing just like as it was recorded.
Okay. Is that the same for all your songs, really? Or do you kind of interpret them differently on different nights?
Well, I mean, like, up until this point, the songs have all been written strictly based on like how they're going to sound live, because that's just what we did, right? It was, this DIY indie kind of punky thing. And it was kind of only recently where we started thinking, okay, so now that we've been in the studio, now that we know what's possible, maybe next time we can try certain different things. And now that we have a better understanding of the live of how a live show goes, we can play with certain songs live. And that's one of my favorite local Vancouver bands is a band called N.W.A.
It sounds like something from Austin Powers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They are amazing, like so unbelievably talented. So in the live performances, I kind of had noticed they would do certain things with the song where they would draw it out a little bit and then slowly bring the energy down. It would be quieter and quieter and quieter, and they would kind of act like nobody would really know what was happening, and they kind of acted like they didn't know what they were doing either. And then all of a sudden they bring it back up again.
Right.
And the whole show was a series of these like ebbs and flows where people had kind of time to breathe, and then they were back to just like jumping and dancing, and it's just good. It's crazy. And so now I've kind of started trying to incorporate that into our live set.
Interesting. So how is the Vancouver scene anyway? You mentioned Vancouver.
Yes.
Are there any other like newer bands that maybe we wouldn't heard of that you think people should be paying attention to?
I it's funny you say that, just because I'm also in the middle of when the pandemic had started, I needed a new hobby, let's say. So
right. Yeah, we all
started so I started learning how to produce, right?
Oh.
And so just because that was something that had kind of interested me. And so on the side, I like to produce for kind of younger local singer-songwriter types, right? And now that outdoor shows have kind of started coming back and certain things are allowed now.
Yeah,
I see this whole generation of younger kids just, making music and starting bands. And this one singer like Izzy Senadis. Izzy Senadis. I know not as many bands, but I see a lot of like singer-songwriters with bands that have been playing, and I'm like, wow, these are all incredible. And I feel old because that used to be me like 2 years ago. That is
2 years
weird.
ago.
Yeah. And that's been a really cool thing. Like it's been difficult because now the weather isn't as nice, and I'm not sure what the situation is going to be with like the indoor shows, but people want to see the music, right?
And more than ever.
Yeah. And they will come.
And who do you think is like, when you think of Vancouver, is there one band or artist that you think of that represents that city?
You know, I used to say it was Peach Pit, but I almost feel like Peach Pit doesn't belong to us anymore. So I'm not really sure. Like all of my favorite local acts they're all so wildly different that it's difficult for me to really put a pin on it. Like I know that there's a lot of that kind of indie pop rock type thing that kind of it's like Peach Pit, you know, of that style that's very popular here. But there's also, you know, there's also hip hop and R&B and shoegazy things, and there's all kinds of things.
Yeah, shoegaze is making a comeback. I think I'm hearing more and more of that sound.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's go back a little bit. What was the first music you remember hearing?
Oh man, Raffi. The first music I remember hearing was Raffi.
Okay,
you know?
Where did you hear that? Just at home?
It would have been in the family van on like a road trip or something.
Right.
When my mom, like, you know, my mom had a bunch of CDs, like a big, like it was like a black, like you zipped it open and there were, it was a bunch of CDs in it. And so one of those was Raffi, and to this day, I still know the lyrics to all the songs.
I think that happened, like the music in your childhood, because there wasn't as much choice as there is now with streaming and all that. You listen to it so repeatedly, and at that age, everything soaks into your brain, and the lyrics just stick with you, and you can hear it like years and years later, and suddenly you just remember every word. It just comes back.
Yes, that's absolutely what it is.
And I think a lot of people, their first memories of music is on road trips, like you say.
Mm-hmm. And I remember it was on these road trips where I got my first like there's the first music I remember hearing, but then there's like the first music I heard where I was like, wow, like what is this? Right. I to this day, like I've been trying to chase that feeling, like when I look for music, like wow, music that just like blows my mind.
So tell me about some of the music that did that for you at an early age.
So from an early age, I can think of 3 specific instances in my life when that happened. So my so in that kind of collection of CDs, one of them was Colin James and the Little Big Band 2, not the first one, the second one.
Okay.
And he's this blues guitarist, and it was an album he did with a big band, like with the brass section and all this crazy stuff, doing blues songs, but with this like swing to them. And the first song was the song Jumping from 6 to 6. And I don't know if it was an original or if it's all covers, because I think most of them were covers, but
like reinterpreted covers.
Yeah. And it was just, it had this energy to it. And I was like, wow, what is this? Like, show me more, like, tell me more. Like, I don't know. I didn't know what it was. And to this day, like, I still can't fully put a name to it, but it's just like something that gets you going. Okay.
And you said there was a couple of other instances that spring to mind.
Yes. So the second time, and this one was huge for me, was when I was maybe 13 or 14. I was in high school. I sat next to this guy, Raston, in like almost all my classes. One day in science class, it was maybe in science class, and he goes, "Hey, check this out." And he makes me put my these earbuds in or whatever, and it plays N.W.A.'s Straight Outta Compton, and like just being like a 13-year-old white kid from the suburbs who had like never listened to hip hop, that was just mind blowing to me. That was like, this is like rock and roll. This is incredible. What is this? Like, wow.
I was going to say, it's interesting you mentioned rock and roll and N.W.A, because it's not that long since N.W.A were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And there was a lot of controversy about that, because obviously it's hip hop and people were like, is this rock and roll? Should it be categorized as rock and roll? But you basically just said, for you, it was.
I think it's so rock and roll. Like, I think I see, like, I don't know, when we talk about rock and roll now, it kind of sounds like this outdated, antiquated thing, but I see it as, it's like defiance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
At the very core of it, it's swimming upstream instead of following everybody else.
So was that your introduction to hip hop, or was that a different kind of hip hop that you hadn't heard before?
That was my introduction to hip hop. That was it.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, they're swearing. Like, can they do that? Like, what? Yeah. And that was like, that just began for me. Like, and then it was like, I went down the rabbit hole, and I'm still, to this day, I'm like incredibly passionate about hip hop.
So there you go. You've told me about two instances, and they're very different musically. So what was the third one?
The third one was actually relatively recently. It was maybe like 2-3 years ago. It was it was before I dropped out of college. It was the first time that I listened to Tame Impala. Like, when I fully sat down and listened to it, and been like, with like headphones in, and just like sat there and be like, wow, you don't even need drugs for this, man. This is crazy. Like Currents. I know, like, a lot of Tame Impala fans don't like Currents, but to me, that album is it's like perfect. It's the perfect blend. It's like this blend of like psychedelia and good pop structured songwriting that just comes together in a way where it takes you on this journey, but also it doesn't get self-indulgent.
Have you seen them live yet?
I was supposed to, but then a funny thing happened.
Yeah.
And he canceled his Canadian dates.
Yeah. I saw them in Montreal, and I've seen them twice in Montreal, and the show with all the visuals, like you mentioned, psychedelic, and it's those kind of visuals that they have on stage, and it's good eye candy for sure, as well as sonically. So those,
I think the drum sounds and some of the synths that we used for Island Honey were heavily inspired by that sound.
So you mentioned listening to music in headphones. Is that how you tend to listen to music most of the time? Is that your preferred way of listening?
It really depends. Like, I'm very much like, recently I've been very go. And so a lot of the music I listen to is just on my Bluetooth converter in the car. I don't get a lot of opportunity. Like, sometimes I like to take some time and just go for a walk and put my headphones in. Yeah. But a lot of it has really just been on my car. It's really bad. It's really bad car stereo. But like, I guess the bass is like blown out, and so whenever there's a lot of sub in a song, there's like this, like in the back, like you can hear it like vibrating. It's got a certain charm to it.
But like, you're obviously making your own music, but you're also helping other people make music. And I know a lot of people, when they're mixing a record, obviously you're listening to it in the studio or on a computer on good headphones or good monitors, but then they'll take that song into the car and sometimes on a crappy stereo to see if it measures up in those circumstances, because that's where a lot of people are going to listen to it. So maybe you should test things out on your crappy stereo with the blown bass.
The car test. Yeah. Totally.
So earlier in our conversation, you mentioned an album that you're working on. So this is going to be the debut album for the band.
Yes.
Is there anything you can tell me about that at the moment?
Well, okay. The album is called From Bad to Worse and Back Again. The debut project from Black Pontiac. It is a collection of songs that we had written. Some of them were like the very first songs Mack and I had written, but like with lots of kind of revisions. And then some of them we wrote in pre-production.
Okay.
So like all kind of, I guess it encompasses the kind of entire period that we had spent trying to like figure out what it is, going back to like, what Black Pontiac is. And the album is I think it shows because sonically and stylistically, it's going to be a little all over the place. I think Island Honey is on one end of this spectrum of. I don't want to give away what's on the other end yet.
Yeah. Okay.
But, it's very out there. Our producer, Matt DiPomponio, he's like I can't even like all love to that guy. He's like basically been our fifth member through this process, and just kind of he encouraged us to just start throwing stuff at the wall and see what's stuck. You know, just like doing weird things in the studio and trying and being thinking outside the box. And let's like do vocals through like this telephone. Like let's hook up the drums and run it through these guitar pedals and things like that.
Wow.
And this record is his as much as it is ours, and I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, it just kind of, I look back on the songs now because they just need to be mastered now. Okay. I look back on them and I think like they represent who we were at the time that we, you know, wrote them and put them together. And now I feel like we're ready to move on to the next thing and do something a little more mature and a little more cohesive with a little more intention. And that's exciting.
So if somebody had never heard your band before and you could pick one song for them to listen to first, which one would you pick?
Honestly, I would say Tequila Cream.
Okay.
I would say Tequila Cream. Yeah, I think it's that EP is a little bit it's a little bit more like more polished than I think this album is going to be, right? We wanted to do something a little more raw, right? But I think Tequila Cream is kind of the closest thing to me personally that of the kind of direction that we want to take, right?
Okay.
With lots, there's a little bit of pop and a little bit of the hip hop rapping thing and a little bit of this and a little bit of guitar action, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So my last question is, if there was one song from history that you wish you'd written, which one would you choose?
Wow, that I wish I could have written. To me, right now, Pyramids by Frank Ocean.
Nice, yeah.
That song is so brilliant. And it's, you know, it's 10 minutes long, but I'll listen to all 10 minutes every time because of how captivating the story is and what he's trying to say. That would have to be my answer off the top of my head.
If Black Pontiac were going to cover that song, how would you do it?
Wow.
All 10 minutes of it?
All 10 minutes of it. I don't know if like I would feel comfortable covering that song. You know,
you could always completely redo it in your own style.
It's true. There'd be a lot of delay, a lot of reverb, a lot of really like spaciness. Or the second part would be, you know, like where the beat changes. But the first part would be, I think, still staying true to that kind of disco vibe with the drums, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, maybe the same bass. And then I think Mac could figure something out. I know he could. He doesn't like doing covers, but I know he could.
Okay. Well, that's my challenge to you guys. Go and work it out.
Okay. We're going to work it out. We'll make it happen.
All right. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I hope you guys get out over this side of the country sometime soon when you get to play some live shows. And good luck with the album and everything that's coming up. But yeah, thanks very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you too, Steve. It's been a pleasure.